Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 5 of Tough Talk. And we're back to where we all began. With a new month and a new year, we are back to talking about with an update about Virginia 2021 as we move into it tonight. We have, of course, two guests here again. First, I'd like to welcome back Erica Kelly. She is the chair of the George Mason College Democrats and the Virginia College Democrats. Erica, I want to thank you for coming back on with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me once again. It's a pleasure to be with both of y'all.
And then, of course, we have a news guest tonight. He is currently the treasurer of the College Federation of Republican Federation of Virginia. He is also running to be the next chair of the College Republican Federation of Virginia, Trevor Webb. Trevor, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So if you're new here and you don't know how we do this here on Tough Talk, there are 3 general questions that both panelists will answer, and there are 2 personalized questions for each of them. We did a little coin toss in the first half, and Trevor here will start off with the general question. So Trevor, first off with you, we have certainly moved into the start of the primary/convention process for the 2021 elections on both sides. That means we're starting to see the candidates flesh out. We're starting to see who's running, who's in, who's out. I just want to see how you're personally feeling right now about your party's chances and how confident you are, in the House of Delegates races or the Attorney General's, the Lieutenant Governor's race, the Governor's race. I just want to know where you're personally kind of feeling on those races right now.
Absolutely. I think 2021 proves it's a critical turning point here in Virginia. We've had years of Democratic leadership. I think, this COVID pandemic, the subsequent economic, lockdowns, just kind of the pandemic in general has really shown the need for conservative, level-headed leadership here in Virginia. The Northam administration ranks last in kind of our vaccine rollout. So I think our primaries are really going to be really important, showing who can fundraise the best, who can show that they're going to, like I said, who can show that they have the best level-headed leadership that can take this Commonwealth into the future. So I think, 2021, the primaries are heating up. We're going to kind of look at both sides, see who can fare the best. And I'm really, really looking forward to what we can accomplish here in Virginia as the Republican side.
All right, and of course, Erica, the same question will go to you here. This is the same thing. Obviously, the Democrats are the incumbent party right now in Virginia, have been in the governor's mansion for quite some time. House of Delegates side, not as much. Clearly, only their first 2 years in the majority there in 2 decades this past cycle. But how confident are you in taking back and not taking back, but keeping, and maybe even, at least, maybe even if you're lucky, growing the majority?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me. And again, thank you for having me on this evening. Naturally, just like my counterpart, I am just as confident in my party's ability to fare well. I think we probably have some stronger indicators as far as our projected success goes. I personally am also very excited for our primary. I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Webb that it's time for the Democratic Party to move in a new direction. I'm really thankful for Virginia's quirky constitutional setup, where we continue to get to meet new leaders every single term. And I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome. I believe that regardless of who our nominee is, we will be successful in November. Virginia has done nothing but flourish under Democratic leadership, even with the unprecedented challenges we've been faced. And we're looking forward to continuing to deliver for Virginians in the upcoming years.
Of course. And as we move on to the personal questions, Erica, of course, we'll start with you here. And you mentioned, this big slate of new candidates because, of course, Virginia governors can not serve more than 1 term consecutively. But since the last time you came on back in December, in both the governor's race and the lieutenant governor's race, there's been some new entrants into those races for the Democrats, both kind of big name, not big name necessarily, but very progressive individuals. On the lieutenant governor's side, Delegate Mark Levine has jumped into that race. He is from the Arlington area. He would pretty clearly, I think, be maybe the most progressive person who would be in that race so far. And we talked about this last time. It wasn't confirmed yet when we last spoke, but in the governor's race, it is now official. Delegate Lee Carter has jumped in to the governor's race. You were not very supportive of that last time, but do you think his entrance really kind of changes anything in your gubernatorial primary. Now you've got these big four candidates. You think that changes anything, or do you think maybe, the main talking points are kind of staying the same?
Yeah, thank you for following up on this point. By and large, I stand by my previous assessment. I still believe that Terry McAuliffe is the candidate to beat on the path to our nomination. Unprecedented amount of name recognition and fundraising here in the state, which is going to be difficult but not impossible to overcome in a year where a really strong field and ground game is going to be difficult to come by in a safe manner. So that's certainly a complicating factor here that I'm a little bit frustrated by, because I would have loved to have seen the way that the field game would have played out between all these candidates. As far as Elliott Carter's entry, I do want to reaffirm that the reason I am not necessarily excited is because I do recognize that former Governor McAuliffe is kind of the big catch here. And I think splintering the progressive vote is going to be a complicating factor if certain candidates are going to have a path to the nomination. I believe that outside of a ranked choice voting system somehow appearing in the state of Virginia in the next 4 months, which will not happen, unfortunately, it's going to be difficult for anyone like Delegate Carter to be successful in their bid to the nomination. I wish he would have focused more on his tenure in the House of Delegates and allowed the candidates who are already in to battle it out. But we're welcoming into the race. And once again, I stand by whoever our Democratic nominee will be.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the idea of the House of Delegates candidates too. Recently, the announcement came from the government, from the United States government. The census numbers for redistricting and reapportionment will not be ready until the late spring, early summertime. Of course, for the state of Virginia, that means that new maps for 2021 will not be happening. There is no way, with the way of the primaries that will have to work, they would be done in time. We kind of talked about this last time too, a little bit, you and me, that these old maps will probably hurt Democrats a little bit more than the new maps. Are you at all maybe concerned a little bit more now about, keeping that House majority where it's at, or again, even expanding it, the fact that we aren't going to be able to see a couple of new Northern Virginia House seats, which would be pretty likely Democratic, as we are going to stay under this old map, which does slightly favor Republicans a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I would point to two things here. First is our previous success under the current maps, which again are not favorable for Democrats. I don't think we've lost any of the momentum that we've built over these past 4 years since 2016. And I also would like to point back to the special elections we just had at the beginning of January. Frankly, frighteningly low turnout, which in the past has been an indicator that Democrats will struggle to succeed. In both cases, we were successful in protecting Democratic incumbent seats, one of which is a notable swing district from 2017. I feel really confident in our field game. One of the reasons I love that Virginia has elections every single year is that we have really well-trained staff that know exactly what they need to do to mobilize the communities necessary to win. And I'm confident in our wonderful organizers and their ability to continue to deliver. I believe there are room for gains in 2021 for us in the House of Delegates. I expect us to gain 1 to 2 seats if it's a really great night for us. At the very least, I struggle to believe that there's a scenario where we lose the majority. Maybe it gets slimmed. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't an opportunity here for us to struggle a little bit. But I feel confident that at the very least we'll maintain the majority and expand in 2022 when more equitable maps are released that don't discriminate along racial lines. So.
Okay, and then Trevor, moving on to your first personal question here. As I mentioned earlier, you are currently running to be the chair of the College Republican Federation of Virginia. I want you to kind of tell our listeners a little bit about that, about your platform, and about kind of what a college branch for a party does a little bit. And I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in hearing that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we kind of serve as the youngest kind of branch of the Republican Party. So here in the state of Virginia, we do have kind of a system where, we do get seats on our governing body. We do have a say in a lot of our larger decisions, especially the nomination process, which is something that, that's also obviously really big, especially now that we're in 2021. So as the College Republican Federation of Virginia, we are kind of our governing body. We work as an affiliate of our national organization, the College Republican National Committee. So we kind of, we get a lot of programs and a lot of initiatives handed down from there. We kind of divvy those out to our local chapters. We serve as kind of, the grassroots wings, right? So we're always organizing what we call deployments is for our candidates. So this past election cycle for Daniel Gade, we had a Republican candidate. We organized deployment in the 7th District for both Daniel Gade and Nick Freitas, and that was a really big success, and that's something that we try to replicate every year. The first time that I ever got involved in CRs, we had done 3 deployments, and that's something that we really try to focus on as a branch, and we're just we're really excited for this upcoming cycle, and yeah.
Well, you bring up the fact that college Republican board, some of the members of the board can sit on the state central committee, and you talk about the ability to try and influence the nominating process, and that once again has become incredibly controversial and messy on the side of the Virginia Republican Party. After 2 or 3 very contentious state central committee meetings this past winter, it's finally seems like it does seem like, again, controversially, it will be a convention to nominate for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general on the Republican side. The current chair, Ian Waite, who I had on back in December, has voiced his opposition to this decision quite openly, both online and in writing. So yeah, I kind of want to hear what your opinions on that. I mean, I expect that you are disappointed kind of in the ways. Are you going to try and take a more firm stance on this, that you want to see more primaries, that you want to see more, at least if we're going to do these conventions, ranked choice voting and unassembled conventions, are you going to try and take a very firm stance on that if you were to become, the chair of the College Republicans of Virginia?
Absolutely, yeah, and our ticket is running as the pro-primary ticket, if you will. I sat on State Central. I voted for the primary and the primary system because my constituents, the people that I'm running to represent, we are the most affected by a convention, right? So a college student, a lot of them are out of state. Personally, as a college student, I know the financial struggles that can come with traveling. I'm a Virginian, and the difficulty of staying in a hotel or just staying all day at a convention center, funding yourself is just sometimes unrealistic. For a lot of college students. So again, we are running as the pro-primary ticket. I will be completely open with that. I'm absolutely willing to have a discussion with anyone about that. And just kind of explain my side. Obviously, like you mentioned, it's a very, very heated topic, on State Central, and it's been that way for years. But like you said, it's a very divided issue, but we are going to be pretty pro-primary when we're sitting on State Central when we take up the CRFE.
Okay, and of course, moving back to the general questions then, Trevor. Currently, the Virginia House of Delegates and State Senate are currently in the winter legislative session right now. Do you particularly have any legislation that you want to see get more attention that's been passed or is being worked on from your party?
Yeah, well, if I can just kind of drop a little bit, our federation is really working towards kind of ending Confucius Institutes. That's something that we actually worked with the College Democrats with. But kind of if the Democrats are kind of in control in Richmond, we kind of work as a revolving entity. So a lot of work that we're trying to kind of oppose is going to be focused on right to work. We want to protect right to work here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's something that helps keep Virginia in the top tier of job creators in the nation. We want to make sure that we're protecting our minimum wage, keep it where it is, make sure we're protecting small businesses, especially out in Southwest Virginia, where those minimum wage hikes would be crucial. So those are kind of a little bit of the legislative priorities. But I know Democrats are really focusing on criminal justice. I think we could find a lot more areas of common ground. I know that's a really big priority. So that's definitely some of the big priorities here for this upcoming session.
Okay, now moving over to you, Erica. I'm sure, of course, you have your own opinions on this, but you also sent me the Virginia Young Democrats 2021 platform. There's quite a lot here, but big things that already counter Trevor, of course. The first platform, the first policy that you see on here is repeal that white right to work legislation that exists here in the state of Virginia. There's also the asking for passing the Green New Deal of Virginia, which we have heard some candidates take a very who are running statewide as Democrats take a very broad stance on. There's quite a lot of stuff here. Some of it I would certainly say would certainly be to the left of the current party. Some of it will probably be in line with its goals, but some of it certainly to the left. But of course, the same question goes to you in the end. What's the legislation that you want to see get more attention to that's been passed or is being worked on in this current legislative session?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you. Obviously, repealing right to work and passing the Green New Deal are pretty blockbuster pieces of legislation. So I appreciate the opportunity to highlight some pieces of legislation that are moving through the state house right now that maybe aren't getting as much attention as they should be. Specifically, HB 1915, sponsored by Delegate Mugler. This is to raise teacher compensation to be at or above the national average. This is important for us because we know, and social science has told us, the single best investment that you can make in a community is in providing an affordable and accessible public education that is quality. We believe that by providing competitive wages for our teachers and frankly paying them what they're worth, this will improve the quality of experience our students have, especially during a difficult time. I had the opportunity this fall to work full time with students learning virtual. I specifically worked with second and third graders, and those teachers are working 12-hour days through the weekends as well, missing time with their families and their children to support all of us during this really difficult time. This challenge in public education is yet to be seen before, and it's really important for us to support our teachers. There's another smaller piece of legislation which I think is important. I want to shout out our Virginia Teen Dems here. They sponsored a bill this year along with Delegate Samira, or pardon, I misspoke. Like you said, I have a really long list of priorities here. Maybe it was Delegate Rasool. Delegate Rasool, there it is. My bad, I misspoke. So Delegate Rasool sponsored a bill, this is HB 1940, that would allow students who are engaging in civic activities or political activities to miss school with an excused absence. This is already policy in Fairfax County, and it's really helped create engagement. I, as a student, my senior year of high school, faced backlash from my administration when getting involved in politics. I was threatened with the ability of not being able to graduate if I missed too many days of school. Being involved in our political system, which I thought was really unfortunate. And so I'm glad that we're working on providing legislation to protect students and their interests.
Okay, well, that's certainly a last little interesting topic there. I had no idea that was a thing. Back home in Pennsylvania here, my government teacher actually, we had mock elections, and he encouraged us to do stuff and go to homerooms and disturb people to ask for their votes. So certainly maybe a little bit of different side of the coin here. But going on to the personal questions here, of course, starting back again with you, Erica. So much focus goes on to gubernatorial candidates, whether that's Democrats, Republicans. But we can't forget that, of course, the lieutenant governors is elected separately, and that has led to some weird elections sometimes. We have sometimes seen split tickets, the most recent being 2005, when now Senator Tim Kaine won the governorship that year, but Bill Bolling won the lieutenant governor's race that year. That's not what we're talking about here, though. I want to try and focus on these lieutenant governor candidates. And of course, one of the big roles of lieutenant governor is that they preside over the state Senate. And the state Senate, to progressives like you, Erica, has been, even though it is under the control of Democrats, has certainly been what some would call a thorn in the side to your goals, and a nice little rose to people like me and Trevor. Certain progressive legislation has been blocked. There's been, the kind of this group of three Blue Dogs group, Chap Peterson, Majority Leader Dick Saslaw, and Mr. Notorious himself, Joe Morrissey. But many of these lieutenant governor candidates on the Democratic side have taken some hostile stances on some of these members of the state Senate. Elizabeth Guzman, who I just talked to this past week, said she will take, a stronger stance in pushing progressive legislation if she would become lieutenant governor. And then there's Sean Perryman, who I also got the chance to speak to, takes this in a very bold position of saying that even if he is lieutenant governor, he will openly try and fundraise and primary these Democratic state senators. But there's always the question of disunity when it comes to that. Do you think this is the pathway that the party should go down when it comes to these members?
Yeah, thank you for raising this, and I'm glad that you've had the opportunity to speak with Delegate Guzman and Mr. Perryman about their plans to push the Virginia State Senate forward. I want to be clear here. In the end, this is going to be something decided by Democratic primary voters, not myself. So my opinion should be taken with a grain of salt. I personally believe that there is nothing more emblematic of party unity than healthy, productive primaries. It is the ability of a party to disagree, nominate, and move forward to the general election and successfully elect their candidate that really signals that they have the ability to withstand disagreement. I definitely want to dispel the notion that big tent parties are supposed to get along all the time. We've got a lot of folks, a lot of chefs in the kitchen, right? And it's okay if we're bumping elbows every now and then. I do understand that Mr. Perryman's stance is a little bit stronger than in the past, but the truth is the incumbency comes with a lot of power, and it is very difficult to overcome. So I really view Mr. Perryman's commitment to fundraising primary challengers as leveling the playing field, especially in Virginia where campaign finance laws are so lax and our incumbents have unprecedented war chests to go to primary elections with. I really view this as a democratizing move for our party, making primaries more accessible and increasing turnover in the state Senate, more so than I view it as an example of disunity. Whether or not this is the right direction for the party to move, as in going further to the left, that's up for the voters to decide, not just me.
And then, I mean, I think I should bring this up then, of course. It's not like when we talk about these members, it's not like they're in a Colin Peterson situation, who was the famed Democratic blue dog from Minnesota 7th District, where he held a, near Republican double-digit district for probably a decade longer than he should have. We know, to be fair, I mean, as much as I love these guys, to be fair to them, they're not necessarily representing, R plus 10, R plus 15 districts. Peterson, he represents the area that George Mason University is in. That is not going to be a Republican area. Dick Saslaw, kind of in that same way, big Fairfax guy, not going to be a Republican area. Do you think that makes a difference then when you talk about these members when, they are representing, deep blue areas instead of, say, if someone were to get in, in like South Side Virginia, does that make a difference then? And when you're talking about we need to get this guy out versus that's not really worth it compared to who would come in after him.
Oh, absolutely. And as someone who now calls Northern Virginia home, but was raised in an R plus 16 state Senate district, I would take a moderate Democrat over a Republican any day. That's just a matter of pragmatism, and I may differ from my progressive colleagues in that regard. I'd rather win some of your votes than none of them. So when it comes to solid Democrat districts, I do tend to take my gloves off because we have the room to fight a little bit. And I love that. I love being in a place where I don't have to settle. And I think it's really important to tell voters, especially young voters, that you don't always have to settle. You can find a candidate that represents you. And as someone who is currently represented by Chap Peterson, I certainly don't feel that I am represented today. And I am looking forward to the primary period in 2 years.
Okay, certainly very interesting. Now, Trevor, moving on to you. I had to bring this person up to Ian, and I'm going to have to bring her up to you too. Amanda Chase continues to be this distraction for the Virginia State GOP. This week, she made headlines for something that's not necessarily bad for us. She has been censured, of course, by a small bipartisan vote by the state Senate this week. Do you think the fact that now he's been officially censored, do you think maybe this can maybe finally be the start of something of the state party trying to move past her, trying to push her aside and, kind of move past her style of rhetoric and merely her style of politics? Again, I can name off the Lions list for you. Personally, of course, I was offended when she registered herself with two people who came up to my home state and went to Philadelphia with guns. And she hired those people for security when they, even after the fact, they came up to my state with guns to Philadelphia to potentially intimidate people who were counting ballots, aligning herself with the QAnon theory, aligning herself, calling the people who stormed the Capitol building patriots in that immediate aftermath. It's a Lions list. And I know that both me and you are kind of tired of hearing that Lions list. Do you think that maybe her censure and maybe the fact that we had Republicans vote for her censure, say, this can be the start of something. Let's push her aside. Let's move forward. We don't have to be moderates, but we can still be strong conservatives without going down her path.
Yeah, I think this could be a little bit of a wake up call. Obviously, you're going to have any sect of any party support kind of the most far right or the most far left candidate. But the way that I see the race now, I kind of have it's a two-man race, right? You have Delegate Kirk Cox, who was the former Speaker of the House, and you kind of have Pete Snyder as well, who's a businessman. You have people like Glenn Youngkin kind of on the outskirts, trying to kind of make a splash in our nomination process. So that's kind of what I see going forward. I don't see a path where Amanda Chase does get the nomination for our party here in 2021. But hopefully, a bipartisan censorship kind of does give a little bit of a wake up call, gets a little bit jolt into the base. Whether it is convention, whether it is a primary, does kind of it serves as hey, this is maybe not the way that we're going to go down. This is not how we win in 2021.
Well, of course, I'll bring this up then because you mentioned his name. This is the Republicans' new gubernatorial candidate since we last talked about Virginia on here. Pete Snyder. Pete Snyder is kind of interesting in the way that he is kind of the first in either party to be a favorite for a race who is legitimate outsider. He would not be an elected official at all. He's kind of the first in either party in really any race statewide to have come from that type of background. His big thing, though, has been working with the Virginia 30-Day Fund, supporting a lot of these small businesses from, especially minority-owned small businesses of all types who have been hit hard by the pandemic. Through the 30-Day Fund. With that, do you think maybe that, his perspective and his outlook, maybe brings that type of different perspective that state Republicans have maybe needed in this past decade to, maybe get themselves over the line with certain areas and certain groups of people that they need to win these races statewide?
Absolutely, yeah. Now that you mentioned, like Pete Snyder, he's a. I think both the kind of two-man race that we have going on is going to be a really great. It's going to be a great nomination cycle. He does have that experience. His political experience goes as far as his lieutenant governor race, but that business experience is really going to be strong if he is our nominee. That's going to be really strong coming up in this election. He's a businessman, so he knows how to spend money. I believe his field is social media, so that's going to be really important. For this upcoming race, it's obviously important now. It's a pretty big staple of our campaigns in the modern era. But he does bring that experience from the business field. I think that could be appealing, seeing as how we're in an economic recession right now, and Virginians are looking for help. And kind of the message that a businessman can give is saying, hey, like I'm here to help. I know I've done this before. Elect me as your next governor. Just I guess I could see that as his campaign message going forward.
Okay, and then we'll go on to our final general question of the night here. Of course, Trevor, starting with you again. Again, we're moving forward in 2021. We're getting to the place where races are being decided, the nominations are being decided. Trevor, I want to hear, what are your own plans personally to try and help your party secure some victories, whether that be in a House of Delegates race or in the big one, the governor's race? What kind of your own personal plans to help your party secure some victories?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully I'm going into this election cycle as our next federation chair. So I feel that would be a great platform helping out our candidates. I'm going to kind of replicate what I've been doing over the past couple of years, and that is knocking many doors a week. Ms. Kelly mentioned earlier, we have an election every year. So we have well-trained staff. We also have very tired staff. So I do have that experience, and I'm really looking forward to organizing college Republicans, organizing Republicans in general here in Virginia, making sure that the energy is high. We're going to try to kind of keep that that pattern going of when we have a Democrat in the White House, we have a Republican here in Virginia, making sure that pattern stays in our Commonwealth. Try to get back as many of those House of Delegates seats as possible. Try to gain us a chamber here in Virginia. And kind of what I led off with is re-electing that conservative, level-headed leadership that can bring jobs back to Virginia, that can make us #1 again in technology and jobs and education. Making sure that we're going, we're putting our best foot forward, and we have the best, foundation, not just for 2021 as Republicans, but for years to come.
Okay, and of course, Erica, final word goes to you on the same question. Kind of what's your own personal plans to help your party secure victories in key House of Delegate races or in the 3 statewide races in general?
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, my term as chairman of the Virginia College Democrats will be over about middle of April, so I won't be with us all the way until November, but I'm going to work to set my party up for success until then. That's going to happen in 3 key ways. First and foremost, our federation is lucky to have a wonderful relationship with College Democrats of America, especially our federations in DC and Maryland, respectively. So I'm going to be coordinating them as soon as this Sunday, actually, to set up our joint field plan. And so we were all on the same page about what we're going to do to help, what our policy will be on knocking on doors. We want to be wary of any in-person volunteering and making sure that we are protecting the health of both our volunteers and our voters. So once we've reached a consensus on those issues, we are going to mobilize to the best of our ability. Beyond that, I'm going to continue to work with Virginia Young Democrats. This organization successfully contacted well over 600,000 voters in the 2020 election, and we're going to continue to work together to hopefully bump that number up in 2021. And finally, on my own college campus, we're going to be fundraising to make sure that we can offer a paid internship program this fall. We've run this program for quite a few years now. We believe that volunteer labor is valuable and we want to pay them as such. So each year we hire a cohort of about 10, usually college freshmen, to knock on doors, make phone calls, and send texts. So hopefully we'll be setting up that infrastructure in the meantime. And beyond that, I trust that my successor will lead us to victory in November.
All right. Well, I want to thank both Trevor and Erica for coming on tonight. I want to thank them both for talking about their beloved state of Virginia. Of course, here on Election News Daily, Virginia 2021 will continue to be an integral part of our coverage going into the year. We might see both of these folks back in some way before the year is up, of course, when we come down to it. Of course, Erica and Trevor, I want to thank you both again for coming on tonight. This has been Joe Szymanski with Tough Talk. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a great rest of your Thursday night.